Good. I guess it's good afternoon. It's still good morning. Good morning, everyone. You are in this room, hopefully to attend the Icons in Surgery first session. We have two esteemed honorees today, Dr. Orlo Clark and Dr. Walter Pories. This is a initiative that is being managed by the Video-Based Education Committee and has the support of the highest realm of the leadership of the American College of Surgeons. And I'd like to acknowledge Dr. Schweitzberg and Dr. Bill Richards, who really were the brainchild or the brains behind this pilot project. And it's just been a wonderful initiative to be a part of. So I think we'd like to get started today. We have two honorees. We have about 30 minutes per honoree. And first on our list this morning is Dr. Orlo Clark, and he will be presented by Dr. Winchen.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see so many friends and colleagues here to honor Orlo. I'd like to thank Barry Nabinet and the rest of the selection committee for choosing such a deserving honoree. I'd like to thank also Jim McLaughlin and Michael Cohen of Cinemed for their outstanding technical and AV expertise. I'd like to acknowledge and recognize not only Orlo, who is in attendance today, but his wife Carol and his son Andrew, whom many of you know. And a couple other thanks, James Lee and Dan Moran for very gamely coming with me up to New Hampshire to shoot interview footage. We had a great weekend with Orlo and Carol there. And definitely a big thank you to all of the former fellows and also current friends and colleagues who provided so many photographs and videos. It's a testament to Dr. Clark's legacy that the difficult job here was not gathering the material, but it was actually picking and choosing what got to be in the video. And we could probably make 5 more documentary features from the stuff that was excised. So without further ado, here's a brief video presentation to honor one of the 2016 American College of Surgeons Icons in Surgery, Dr. Orlo H. Clark.
For many surgeons, it is providing outstanding care to countless patients in need. For others, it is contributing novel therapies, technologies, or scientific understanding. For the most influential surgeons, it is training the next generation of leaders, providing them with the wisdom, skills, and inspiration to change the practice of surgery worldwide. In the field of endocrine surgery, Orlo Clark has created a surgical legacy unmatched in scope and stature. During a 5-decade career spent entirely at the University of California, San Francisco, Clark has redefined what it means to be a master clinician, surgeon, scientist, and mentor. Orlo Herrick Clark was born on August 7, 1941, in Brooklyn, New York. His father, Orlo Holly Clark, was a surgeon in private practice, and his mother, Elizabeth Herrick Clark, was a nurse.
I think I was probably brainwashed because my mother was a nurse, my father was a surgeon, my uncle was a surgeon, one of my uncles. But I never said I wanted to be a surgeon. I always thought about it, but my uncle was very encouraging, who was a surgeon. My dad never said too much other than do what you want to do, but he sort of let me know that that was one thing he'd like to do. My mother said you could be a farmer. That would be more fun. I said, sure, if you're going to give me a big farm with lots of big equipment already paid for.
While the bulk of his childhood was spent on the East Coast, Orlo spent 2 years in San Francisco from 1944 to 1946, while his father was serving as a naval surgeon in the Pacific Theater of World War II. Although Orlo was quite young during this brief San Francisco sojourn, he believes that the seeds for his lifetime love for the city that would become his home were planted during this time. In 1946, the Clarks moved to Nutley, New Jersey, into a charming house that had been previously owned by the famous sharpshooter Annie Oakley. Orlo would spend the remainder of his childhood in Nutley. His 9th grade growth spurt paid tremendous dividends on the basketball court. Orlo would become the star center for the Nutley High School basketball team and was well known throughout the New Jersey prep leagues for his offensive prowess and defensive tenacity.
One of my coaches in high school knew personalities. He didn't know basketball that well, but he knew personalities. So he knew how to get people motivated. And some people he would scream at, some people he would praise, some people he wouldn't say anything to, and could bring out the best. In college, when I played basketball, the coach knew basketball, but he didn't know personality, so there was always friction in some ways.
High school was also the period during which Orlo would form the most important relationship of his life. In his senior year, he met a young woman named Carol Zeller at a church supper. 2 years his junior, Carol was gracious enough to serve Orlo an extra helping of spaghetti, foreshadowing the countless future Italian meals they would share. And from there, a lifetime bond was born. After high school, Orlo headed north to Cornell University, where he was a zoology major and pre-med. He played basketball all 4 years, facing off several times against future New York Knick and U.S. Senator Bill Bradley when Bradley was at Princeton. Despite his numerous academic and extracurricular commitments, Orlo paid for his room and board for all 4 years of college by holding down a variety of jobs on campus. These included washing dishes at a fraternity house, serving as a dorm counselor, and summer jobs as a postal worker and a landscaper and lawnmower. He also spent a memorable summer working as a scrub tech at his local hospital, gaining familiarity with the tools of his future trade, as well as a valuable understanding of the importance of teamwork and good communication in the operating room. Orlo graduated from Cornell in 1963, and that fall he moved to New York City to start Cornell Medical School. He loved the intellectual environment there and thrived in his classes and rotations. His classmates elected him class president for all 4 years. He and Carol were married during the summer between his first and second year of medical school, and honeymooned in New Hampshire, where they have continued to spend summers for the past 50-plus years. When considering his career choice, Orlo briefly thought about other specialties, but in the end, he chose to pursue general surgery.
I loved in medical school, I loved internal medicine, because there was much more you could do as a student. But surgery can cure people. And I thought that was, for me, that was more. And you can do the internal medicine, but you can still operate and correct the problem if that's what the patient needs. In most cases, not at all.
Cornell surgical residents and faculty spoke highly of the UCSF surgery program under J. Engelbert Dunphy's leadership. In addition, Orlo's mother had always fondly recalled the family's wartime years in San Francisco. Orlo applied to multiple programs around the country, but he ranked UCSF as his top choice and was accepted. After more than 20 years away, he returned to San Francisco, this time for good. The UCSF Department of Surgery in 1967 boasted an impressive lineup of leaders in American surgery. Besides Dunphy, the other luminaries who would profoundly influence Orlo Clark's career were Leon Goldman, Maurice Galante, Horace McCorkle, Orville Grimes, William Blaisdell, Albert Hall, and Lawrence Way. Orlo had a keen interest in endocrine surgery and learned a great deal from Goldman and Galante about the scientific and technical aspects of the field. However, his love for endocrine surgery truly flourished during his one-year fellowship at the Hammersmith Hospital in West London under the tutelage of Professor Richard Wellborn and Mr. Selwyn Taylor. This year-long immersion in the care of patients with thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal, and endocrine pancreas disorders marked the beginning of a lifelong pursuit of clinical and scientific knowledge in the field.
Well, I went to medical school at Cornell, an undergraduate. I came to UCSF to do an internship and residency. And UCSF at that time had a research year or years in the middle of the program, probably just to keep you alive because you've been worked to death. And so I went to Dr. Dunphy, who was the chair of the Department of Surgery, and very enthusiastic person, and told him I'd be interested in going to London and do either endocrine or GI surgery. He said, "Oh, I'm off to London next week." And he was, even though he was Irish, he was an Anglophile. And I'll get you a job. So went to work with Mr. Selwyn Taylor, who was the Dean of Hammersmith Hospital Royal Postgraduate Medical Center, and Richard Welborn, who was the chair of the Department of Surgery. And they really were probably, in some ways, internationally, the fathers of endocrine surgery, having had a course in endocrine surgery in 1970-71 when I was there in London with them, lucky enough to be with them. And you saw the interaction of not only the surgeons with the surgeons, but the surgeons with the endocrinologists and other doctors.
Upon the completion of his residency in 1973, Orlo began his academic career at the San Francisco Veterans Administration Medical Center. His clinical practice and scientific research were dedicated towards the understanding and treatment of endocrine surgical disorders, especially thyroid cancer.
So when I came back, I had probably done more thyroid and parathyroid surgery than most of the attending surgeons that you see, except for maybe one or two. I don't know if I did them well, but I did them. And the field was just an exciting field. I think it was something new. It's a part of general surgery. And like anything, if you focus on it, hopefully you have to answer questions and do it better.
Orlo recalls his early years at the San Francisco VA with great fondness. He performed a broad range of operations in general and endocrine surgery, and built a powerful research program that performed basic science and clinical investigation in thyroid and parathyroid disease. Within a few years of joining the faculty at the VA, Orlo branched out to the main campus at UCSF, where he began a thriving endocrine surgery practice. In 1985, he was appointed professor of surgery at UCSF. When UCSF opened a new campus at the Mount Zion Hospital in 1991, Orlo was appointed the chief of surgery. In the ensuing decades, he built the UCSF Mount Zion Medical Center into one of the premier clinical and research institutions for endocrine surgery in the world.
And we had a lot of students or fellows from other countries. We never encouraged them to stay. If you wanted to stay, a few stayed, but we wanted them to go back to their own countries if they could, to hopefully continue the friendship and the quality in many countries around the world.
In 1979, endocrine surgery was not yet a recognized specialty of general surgery. Orlo was one of 5 forward-thinking endocrine surgeons who met in San Francisco and planted the seeds for what would become the American Association of Endocrine Surgeons.
At that meeting, Norman Thompson, who unfortunately died recently, Ed Kaplan, Jack Monchek, and Tony Edis. Tony was a surgeon at the Mayo Clinic, but then went to Australia, returned to Australia, where he was from, decided to form the American Association of Endocrine Surgeons, see if we could. And then Norman Thompson hosted the first meeting in Michigan, University of Michigan, and then the second one was hosted by Glenn Gilhood in Washington, D.C. So I think the time was right. I think just the time was right. People were interested in the thyroid. I mean, the beauty of endocrine surgery is not just the technical ability, it's the intellectual ability, who needs an operation at what time, how much, what extent, and all those different things.
Under the guidance and mentorship of Orlo and his colleagues, the AAES would grow in a few short decades into a robust and thriving surgical organization, now with 600-plus members.
As you mentioned, the American Association of Endocrine Surgeons went from, I think, 50 to 80 at the first meeting to 600, I think, at the meeting just recently. So it's an exciting field, and hopefully we will keep its friendly nature.
In 2006, Orlo was given the American Association of Endocrine Surgeons' highest honor, the Oliver Cope Meritorious Achievement Award.
But surgery I mean, I've been blessed to, first of all, have so many great fellows, colleagues, and patients. Who you think when a patient puts his or her confidence in you.
Of all his illustrious career achievements, however, Orlo is perhaps proudest of his extended family of more than 150 endocrine surgeons worldwide, whom he has trained throughout the past 5 decades. Many of these former fellows are now chiefs of endocrine surgery divisions and leaders in the American and international associations of endocrine surgeons. Orlo's come one, come all policy of welcoming any and all interested trainees and students to his laboratory and clinic in San Francisco has resulted in an entire generation of new endocrine surgeons who proudly refer to themselves as members of the Orlo Clark Fellows Club. Orlo's generosity at home has translated into countless trips abroad as an invited speaker and guest faculty at institutions around the world.
But I think it's good to take a break from what you do to get a different perspective sometimes. When you get that from travel, that's why I think visiting other places and seeing how people do things is good. I'm surprised people don't do it more.
Orlo and Carol Clark have 3 children, Catherine, Emily, and Andrew, and 6 grandchildren, Lila, Max, Cosmo, Luca, Madeline, and Ophelia. Although the Clark children have all pursued non-medical careers in the arts and humanities, they give credit to their father for instilling in them a passion for learning and an interest in the connections between art and science. Orlo retired from clinical practice in 2013, but he remains active in research and teaching. He and Carol were able to pursue a lifelong dream of writing a book on endocrine disorders in art. Published in 2011, The Remarkables traces the unique and fascinating history of how artists have depicted those with endocrine abnormalities, including goiters, pituitary disorders, virilization, and feminization.
So the best piece of advice Dr. Clark ever gave me, I remember we were driving in his Saab back from Grand Rounds at Parnassus back to Mount Zion, and we were talking about his career and how he accomplished so many amazing things. And he turns to me while he's driving down the highway, mind you, and he says to me, "James, you have to love what you do. You're not going to like what you do every day, but you have to love it." And that's, when you hear someone say that, it sounds kind of like a platitude, sort of one of those throwaway statements that you have to make. But with Dr. Clark, you actually believe it. He absolutely loved coming to work every day. He loved mentoring people. He loved writing papers and taking care of people. And it's pretty inspiring. And so whenever I'm feeling burnt out or, kind of frustrated at work, I think about that car ride and I try and remember the things that I really love about my job.
A true teacher shows one where to look, but doesn't show one what to find. Orlo H. Clark has been that most important and powerful teacher that has affected so many of us in phenomenal ways. His example, his knowledge, his care, balance, quest for answers, and curiosity has enlightened those who have been fortunate enough to receive his gifts. His gift has multiplied the best of each of us. His gift to the science of surgery will be magnified with no limit, and it will never die. He has bequeathed us to dig deeper, to ask why, to find meaning, and to dismantle untruths. His support has been a quintessential pillar in the lives of those he has taught. Thank you, Orlo.
It's a pleasure to be asked to contribute to this video session honoring my mentor and surgical hero, Dr. Orlo Clark. Dr. Clark excelled in teaching, research, clinical care, and collaboration. He's one of the true surgical icons of our age. I was fortunate to become an endocrine surgery fellow at UCSF and spend a year learning from this surgical icon. My experience with Dr. Clark, the lessons that he taught me in the clinics and the OR and outside of the OR, shaped my career and defined my approach to teaching and patient care. On my first meeting with Dr. Clark, it was apparent to me that I was in the presence of an exceptional mentor, someone who was capable of imparting knowledge in a way that I had never witnessed before. I spent the entire day with him, beginning with his basic research meeting in the morning and then continuing on through his clinic where we saw 40 patients. I learned more in that one day about endocrine surgery than I had my entire training to that point. As a fellow, he instructed me in his meticulous and delicate approach to thyroid and parathyroid surgery, and equally important, his kind and compassionate care of the whole patient. He emphasized the golden rule of treating the patient the way that you would want to be treated. In addition, he pushed me to methodically address and investigate the questions that arose in training and to develop a research program. My philosophical approach to the patient, to endocrine surgery, and to endocrine research all stem directly from what I learned from Dr. Clark. As a colleague, Dr. Clark has continued to have a tremendous impact on my career. He continues to serve as a mentor and a friend and a role model. The enduring legacy of Orlo Clark is that he has educated more endocrine surgeons than anyone else, period.
Who is Dr. Clark to me? Well, first of all, He was my faculty member that took me under his wing to teach me the skills and the knowledge in endocrine surgery. He then became my mentor as I realized that I could take so much more away from this gentleman than surgical skills or medical knowledge. He taught me how to approach life, how to approach its challenges, how to overcome barriers, how to believe in myself. In fact, I think he believed in me before I believed in myself. He then became my colleague as I moved away from the nest in San Francisco, where I did my fellowship in endocrine training with him, up to northern Canada, where I am now. And I still call him from time to time when I have questions and need his wisdom. He became a friend, someone that I turn to when things are tough, when things seem unachievable, when, quite frankly, you need a friend to
Well, that was a remarkable video, and I'd like to congratulate Dr. Shin for just taking this on and really putting together an enduring product video. So the format is that we'd like to open this up for discussion. We will be filming your comments, so be careful what you say. And these will be posted with the video on the American College of Surgeons website. So Dr. Shin, your comments, please.
Does anyone have any thoughts, reminiscences, or stories? Wow, come on. They're all afraid of the time. Turn off the cameras, and then we'll all be open and honest. No, well, it was certainly my pleasure to put this together. You know, the enduring legacy, as was already mentioned, I think truly is the family in nature. I mean, the branches of this tree go very far and then have created many sub-branches, twigs, roots, etc. And you can't come to any surgical gathering without finding co-family members of this Orlo Clark family. I see that Peter Angelos has very bravely decided to step to the mic here.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment. I don't really have a question.
State your name and your institution, please.
Peter Angelos from the University of Chicago. I have to confess I was never a fellow with Dr. Clark, but I feel as though I have incredibly been enriched by his friendship and insights throughout the years. And I really think it was wonderful to see all of the fellows who Orlo trained. But Orlo, you have had an influence well beyond the people that you've trained. Your friendship and really all that you have taught us for so many years has been wonderful. So thank you very much.
Michael Ye from UCLA.
Hi, just a little story to tell. I remember starting in UCLA by myself, being really scared about what would happen. I made a lot of phone calls to Dr. Du and Dr. Clark to help me. One day I saw a patient in clinic who had 5 scars on her neck. Had all these operations. I was terrified, and I took her home, took her chart home that night. I'm sorry.
You take her home.
I took the chart home, and I poured over it, and I poured over it, and I poured over it, and I thought to myself, you know, this is over. I cannot do this case. I'm going to send her to Dr. Clark. And the next day there was another clinic, and there was a lady who came in and looked the same. 5, like train tracks all over her neck, and I said, I cannot do this case. 2 in a row, and I said, who asked you to come see me? Dr. Clark asked me to see you. So I heard you, and you helped me. Thanks.
Dr. McHenry from Case Western.
So my recollection of first meeting Dr. Clark as a young fellow, and I went up and introduced myself, and I said, hi, Dr. Clark, I'm Chris McHenry, and he immediately said to me, no, it's Orlo. And every other time that I ever saw him, he always remembered my name. And to me, that little, just having somebody of his stature and his reputation to remember your name and to say, hi, Chris, how are you doing, made such a huge impact on me. And then I can remember I asked him to write a letter for my promotion. And, you know, he took the time to write this letter, and then when I saw him at another meeting, he came up and said, you know, you're really doing some good research, Chris. And it made just that time, that little comment, that support that he gave really had an impact on me in terms of stimulating me to do more and to aspire to be somebody like Dr. Clark. So, Dr. Clark, thank you very much for all that you've done.
Thank you, Chris. Dr. Yim.
John Yim, City of Hope. I just want to say that I did not train under Dr. Clark, and the only interaction I had with him other than a committee was a taxi cab that we rode together off of a plane. But despite that, I've actually asked him for help more than once by email, and he's always been there to offer help, even to somebody that doesn't train under him, somebody who doesn't know that very well. So I really appreciate his openness, his ability to help everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Becky Sipple from Madison.
Thank you, Rebecca Sipple. I am a fellow who trained under Dr. Clark, and I think about the experience that I had with Dr. Clark, and I think that so much of what he exemplified is what I try to emulate in my practice every day. I'm an endocrine surgeon, but I love endocrinology, and I love the disease processes that we treat. And I remember seeing every day in clinic that he was just not passionate about the surgery, but passionate about the diseases that we take care of every day. And I learned how to take care of these patients and these diseases in my fellowship with Dr. Clark. And I still, to this day, want to take care of the entirety of the patient because of that passion. But I think what was really neat to me is he really stimulated why I want to do research and why I want to do academics. Because in the end of the day, you can be really passionate about being the best clinician and the best surgeon, but to really move the field forward, we have to try to make the field better and use that knowledge and expertise to answer the questions that are critical to make us better in the future. And I think that every time there was a question that I asked Dr. Clark and I didn't know the answer, or he didn't know the answer, he said, we need to find the answer. And I think that that's what drives me every day in my research program, is if I find a question and I don't know the answer, I know that Dr. Clark wants me to find the answer, and that's what motivates me in my research program. So thank you, Dr. Clark, for instilling that passion in me and that commitment to research and moving the field forward. So thank you.
Herb Chen from Birmingham.
Orlo, I rise to also as not someone you didn't formally train, but someone you had an immense influence on. Just your touch when you came to visit as a visiting professor when I was a resident. And you really, as many have said, inspired us to pursue endocrine surgery, but I think inspired us to pursue science, especially be a surgeon scientist. So every time I had the chance to talk with you, how you encouraged me to stick to the science, stick to the lab research, pursue NIH funding as you so successfully did, and really had set the tone for what our field should be moving towards. So again, thank you so much for your inspiration to those who got exposed to you just for a short period of time, but you made an immense impact.
Dr. Moalem from Rochester.
It's hard to believe that there's elements of Dr. Clark's teachings that have not been covered, but his influence extends so far beyond surgeons and patients. It extends to every operating room across this country, and I've spoken with many, many past fellows all over the country, and these are fellows who are recognized for treating the staff, the nurses, everyone around the hospital, the patients' families, with the utmost respect, admiration, and appreciation. And I think that especially today, as forces all over the country are trying to divide us, I think that it's your teachings and the way we watch you treat every single person you cross paths with for an entire year as if they were your equal or even your superior in many ways, taught all of us to treat people in that way. And I think that that really does a lot of good. And we all thank you very, very much for that.
And last but not least, Martha Zeiger.
Orlo and Carol, I want to thank you as well. I didn't train formally with Orlo, but I might as well have. Orlo, as everyone has said, has always been welcoming. I met him as a young surgical resident, and the fact that he took the time to talk to me and know me was really incredible. I thank you for your friendship. I thank you for your guidance and your inspiration. And I also thank you for making the world of endocrine surgery basically a world, a family for all of us around the world. It's because of all of the connections that you've made throughout the world. So thank you.
I'd like to make one final comment. I think we're going to have to move on, but I have just one final comment that echo Dr. McHenry's comments that Orlo is a gentleman endocrine surgeon and always makes the effort to introduce you to whoever's in his circle. And Carol, I've been introduced to you probably 50 times. I feel like I know you very well. I think we're going to need to move on to our next, Dr. Snyder. One comment.
I'm sorry, just one short comment. I didn't train with Dr. Clark, but I want to emphasize the humanity of Dr. Clark and his wife, Carol. I'm speaking for Patty, my wife, and I that met you at an international meeting in more of a social kind of setting. And I knew I was speaking with one of the giants of endocrine surgery. He wrote the textbook. But your openness and your welcoming attitude and your friendliness to new surgeons, individuals that you're meeting, and their spouses was overwhelming. And I will always remember that. Thank you.
That was really an outstanding video. Our next icon in surgery is Dr. Walter Pories. And Dr. Manny Zervos made the video. It's an outstanding video, and I'll let him introduce the next icon.
Thanks, Dr. Richards. This is a little bit like church, and so Orlo and Walter are the icons, and Wen and Lane and I are the iconographers, I guess. So I'm going to make my comments first because it'll help put our video in a little better context for you. It's a little, ours is a little bit unconventional, I would say. Last December, I had the pleasure of driving Walter to the Southern, which is about 5.5 hours from Greenville, North Carolina, where we live. Walter still drives, but didn't want to navigate those windy Allegheny Mountain roads by himself in the dark. And as you're about to see for yourselves, he is a consummate storyteller. And that made the trip go by really fast, and it was really fun. Ironically, at the same meeting and during one of those hurried and extemporaneous breakfasts that occur in that ballroom at the homestead, Barry and Abnett told me that they were considering honoring Walter as an icon in surgery this year. And with his story still fresh in my mind from the ride up, I immediately volunteered to make the video. I didn't realize what I was getting myself into. And if things weren't bad enough, I lied to Barry and I told him that Walter's health was failing. And that we'd better get this in the can before it was too late.
That is true.
So Walter is 86 years old. You're going to all ask yourself that question the next few minutes, and he is in exceptional health, just so you know. So we set out on this really paradoxical project, ostensibly very simple because of the subject matter, so rich and deep, but exquisitely difficult because of the intense pressure to produce something that's worthy of Walter's remarkable journey. And as you might surmise, distilling this journey into 18 minutes is nearly impossible, but there are certain aspects of Walter's life that sort of surface in repeated conversations that we've shared over the course of the last decade. And I think his life could best be characterized as a series of accidental discoveries, coincidences, with unintended consequences that he transformed into events that would change the lives of literally millions of people. Beginning with a coincidence that played out in no man's land between Germany and Poland in 1939. And then later a sober realization that pretty good in the arts wasn't good enough to satisfy his inherent desire to help his fellow man. That ultimately led to his dissemination of another man's discovery so that millions would ultimately benefit, and this will all become very clear in the video. And finally, the accidental pursuit of perfecting a flawed operation because it was the only one that wouldn't offend the existing surgical community in rural North Carolina, where he had chosen to set his mark. An operation that unexpectedly would provide a cure for a disease that even the best minds in medicine still struggle to understand and treat. So before we begin, just a couple comments. First, many of you know that Walter is an avid cartoonist. His cartoons are available in paperback form through the college, and we've included several of them in the video today. And I have exercised artistic license in two areas. Walter's wife of 39 years, Marianne Rose, never took his surname, but for the purposes of posterity, I present it as such for future viewers of this video. And then Betsy Tuttle, the current chair of the Department of Surgery, is not the Walter J. Pories Chair in Surgery as I presented. We are in the midst of a major capital campaign to consummate that chair, which is imminent, and I'm certain that Walter's elevation as an icon in surgery will put us over the top. So, on behalf of myself and my co-author, Lane Guyton, who is a product of the school and the department that Walter founded and who equally contributed to this video, I proudly and humbly present to you, is there a surgeon in the house, the accidental rise of an icon in American surgery.
Dr. Pories has spent his life in academic medical centers as a surgeon, educator, and leader. I had the opportunity to work with him as a medical student. We invited senior medical students to spend a month with him learning what it was like to be an academic surgeon. I remember these experiences as if they were yesterday. What struck me then, and still does today, was the transparency he used in his teaching methods, his commitment to fundamental values, and his love of the community around him and his profession.
I was born in Munich in 1930, and grew up there during the Nazi times, and because of that, my family sent me to my uncle's house, who lived in a little town called Cheyenne. And there we had a really bucolic life in farm country. He and his wife were both very active physicians. Life was pretty good. We were assimilated. I had no idea that we had a Jewish background. But in 1936, our family was notified correctly that we were Jews on both sides of the family. And from that point on, we wore gold stars and that said Jew on it. And we were not allowed to then go to any school except a Jewish school, and there was only one, that was in Munich. But in 1938, during that Kristallnacht, that got burned partly, and then we went to school in a burned building. My dad really is a central part of the story here. He was a decorated veteran from the First World War, and I think in many ways he thought that all of this was going to disappear. He'd also played semi-pro soccer, so he was always disappointed to have a little kid like me who wanted to draw, write poetry, when he wanted a jock. Anyway, he didn't get a jock. In 1923, when he was walking through the streets of Munich, suddenly some gunfire broke out. And so he ducked behind a building, and he saw the guys who were shooting were the guys from his army unit in the First World War. And so he said, I don't know what it was all about, but I shot and didn't do much. And that was the end of that story until May of 1939, which is pretty late. We still were unable to get a visa to get out of Germany. So we were arrested at 4 in the morning and brought to first the Munich headquarters and taken out to Dachau, the concentration camp. But my dad was not there. My dad was off on a business trip. And then we were put on a train, and it took 3 days to get to the border between Germany and Poland. Just before they got to our car, the Polish guards arrived. This was a no man's land between Germany and Poland. And said, we don't like Jews either, but you're not going to shoot them here. When my dad came back from a business trip, he learned that we were gone. We'd been arrested. So with this black coat, the gold star, he walked into Nazi headquarters. To his surprise, out came the number 2 guy at that office and said, Theo, what are you doing here? And what's this gold star business? They'd been together in the same unit in World War I. And so my dad told him what had happened, that we were Jews, and noticed. And the guy said, well, you helped us in 1923, and we don't forget. And they then took us off to a little chapel, changed our names, gave us different identification, and got us to Portugal.
And they were very lucky to escape the country in 1939, fleeing first to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, and then on to the United States, where they settled in the Milwaukee area. Walter attended Wesleyan College.
I wanted to be an artist, and I played music in various bands, and was an art major and a music minor, and had virtually no science. And then came a day when I was asked to get the homecoming band because of my interest in music, and I found these guys, and they started to play, and it was glorious. They were fabulous musicians, And he said, "Hey, kid, aren't you the kid who wanted to sit in with us? Why don't you go get your horn?" So I got my horn, and in about 10 seconds it was evident I'd never, ever get to that level of music. And I said, I better go to medical school. And I left the dance, went upstairs and applied for medical school. How to get to be a doctor. I did get interviews at 2 places where they didn't require any science. One was Harvard, and the other was Rochester, where there was the dean was a Nobel Prize winner, and it was one of those days where he would personally interview the students. And I walked in, he said, "You've had a lot of art." I said, "Yes." And then he talked about art. I said very little, and I got admitted. And then after a year, probably in the first maybe half a year at medical school, he stopped me in the hall and he said, "You know, weren't you the guy who didn't have much science?" He said, "You better work in a lab." So I went back to the dean's office and they said, "There's this crazy guy named Strain, but it's the only job we have available." So I went to see this guy. He looked like Einstein with his hair all over the place. And when I joined him, he was interested in amino acids and their role in healing. And so he gave rats fake amino acids, and the rats had small wounds and burns. And what his point was that you could find out where that amino acid might be critical because the healing would stop at that point. But one group of rats healed much faster. They healed faster than the controls because he realized that in the precipitation of that amino acid, zinc was used to do the precipitant. He said, "Go look up zinc." The only thing I found out was that zinc was extremely important in agriculture. You couldn't grow tobacco in North Carolina, for example, unless you added zinc to the soil. And there was absolutely nothing I could find about animals or man. And then we gave zinc to the rats, and it duplicated the rapid healing. So once we started doing this work, it made a huge difference in animal agriculture. And then, of course, we then showed it was also important in man, and we showed it led to better healing in man. Then we showed that you needed it for growth and development of embryos. And by that time, the industry itself had shown that it was a really major contributor in nutrition. We were using TPN like everybody else, and at 3 weeks, it became apparent that people get really scaly skin, and the skin would be discolored and things wouldn't heal. So it didn't take much thinking to say, well, maybe the problem is that TPN doesn't have any trace elements in it. And it happened to be that Dudrick and I were fairly good friends. We were both interns at about the same time. And so we talked about this, and then it became apparent to both of us that maybe what needed to be done was put trace metals into TPN. I got this phone call. I said, we'd like to come to Greenville to look at a job. And we had this little book with a map on it, and I looked up Greenville. There's no Greenville in North Carolina. So I said, who is this? Is this a joke? My chair was Holden, Bill Holden, was chaired case, and he said, did you get that call from Greenville? He said, it's a great job. You can start a medical school. He said, call him back. So I called him back.
When Walter came to this area, he says, what's an operation that the private surgeons aren't really doing, because we don't want to upset them. So he says there's a lot of obesity in the East.
And I read a paper that said that this chap Mason had found a new operation that he called the gastric bypass. And it was a loop that went up to the proximal segment, and we did 2 cases. People lost weight, but they vomited bile. So we said we'll add a Roux-en-Y. And we managed to follow 837 patients from 1980 to 1996 with a 95% follow-up. And that then, it's still the world's most intensely followed too, but that showed the weight stays off, diabetes goes away, hypertension goes away, and all these things. Our patients were losing weight, and there was a guy named Jose Carroll, and he came down and he said, "Walter, I have this fat patient who's a diabetic I can't control. Maybe he'd do better if he lost some weight." So we operated it, and the glucose was normal. He sent me 2 more patients, and the glucose was normal afterwards. And then the 5th one, it became apparent that this was really different. Diabetes, considered incurable, was suddenly disappearing.
12 years ago, largely as a result of the efforts of Dr. Pories, the NIH funded and established a research consortium which came to be known as the Longitudinal Assessment of Bariatric Surgery, or LABS. Dr. Pories was instrumental in helping guide the consortium to establish the research priorities, analyses, and reporting.
I think one of his greatest contributions has been the gastric bypass, which was sort of a community contribution in the United States, but the Roux-en-Y gastric bypass, the modification of the original Mason procedure, is to a great extent due to his credit. His paper in 1995 on what gastric bypass can do for type 2 diabetes is a milestone in the entire history of surgical contributions to knowledge.
I was a home health care nurse. I didn't like ORs at all, and I said, "Oh, I don't want to go meet this guy in the OR."
We met, and we went around, and I knew when I saw her, that's the one I'm going to marry.
Well, that was mine too. By the end of the day, I thought, yeah, that's the one. That's the one I want to marry. Oh my goodness.
Her great legacy has been to raise our 4 girls that I had from the first marriage. And she's become their mother, she's become their guide, and under her tutelage they've all developed into really successful, wonderful people. Her legacy is much more important than mine.
I think globally we would have to say the development of bariatric surgery and the discovery that bariatric surgery results in remission of diabetes. Because I really do think that ultimately the cure will be found through that route. So I think globally that's probably your biggest contribution.
I cannot claim either the zinc or the diabetes or gastric bypass as my own, because those were all done as a group. And so I think my legacy is getting people to work together.
Any acknowledgement of Walter's legacy has to include the development of this department of surgery from the impoverished tobacco and cotton fields of this region in the eastern part of North Carolina. By founding a department of surgery, he has allowed my predecessors, Dr. Randy Chitwood, to develop and present robotic cardiac surgery to the world, and for Dr. Mike Rotundo to bring the initiatives of the college in the care of the injured trauma patient to this region. Finally, and probably most importantly, Walter was able to recruit and train individuals in subspecialties of surgery who remained in the region and provided care to patients who would otherwise not have access to that care.
He loves the human spirit. He loves people, and he loves the potential he sees in people, both in his patients and in his students. And he takes the time to invest in people, and that's what makes him great.
You were a perfect counterpoint to a conversation about how aspirational you can be in science. I was always encouraging us to only add the variables that had a specific scientific question associated with them. You were always trying to elevate the conversation about all the amazing things we could learn if we only knew all the details about everything. We fought back and forth for years on this until you finally ended the debate one day by gently nudging me with a cartoon that you had drawn. It was simply a picture of Moses with the tablets in his arms, looking up to God and saying, "But what's the hypothesis?"
So Walter is a patriot, a scientist, a leader, a great surgeon, and to me and to so many others, a great, great friend.
That was truly an amazing, amazing video.
Lane, you want to come up and join me?
I'd like to encourage all of you to stand up, come up to the microphone, announce your name, where you're from, and give your point of view. I'd like to say that I've been in so many meetings where your humanism, your ability to draw the little cartoon, to make that poignant point to bring us all together has enriched us entirely. You are truly an artist and a humanitarian, a great person.
And Walter, I'd like to take the privilege of the chair to add to what Bill said. You and I sat at an FDA panel meeting for about 8 hours together, and I knew your daughter, Susan, but I had never actually met you. And they present a lot of data, and I'm sitting right next to you, and all of a sudden I see these cartoons start to pop up. And I'm trying to listen to the data. I really am trying to be about the data, but the cartoons in some ways were more interesting than the data. So I really had just a marvelous experience. It was a pleasure to get to know you that day, and you are an icon in surgery.
I want to say just one comment, very intimate. Walter and I shared a flight back from Vancouver to the East Coast, and it was about a 4.5-hour flight, maybe more. And I learned more on that flight than I had, up to that time. And basically, we talked about insulinomas, and that being the recipe for unraveling the mystery of diabetes. And I'm very pleased to report that we now have 80 specimens and have taken your lead, your idea, and run with it. And I'm surrounded by very bright scientists, but it's your idea, and I give you your amazing inspiration for knowledge.
Hello, I'm Peter Cripps from USC. I just want to say that every time I ever give a lecture in bariatric surgery, I have a photograph of the first telegram in 1922 that announced the award of the Nobel Prize to Banting and Best and their mentor in Toronto. And my next slide is a photograph of Walter saying that he's not a Nobel laureate yet. And the wheels of God grind slowly, but I still hope that in Stockholm there will be an opportunity to recognize Walter's contribution, because it's actually statistically of enormously greater magnitude than even that wonderful discovery of insulin. Thank you so much.
John Morton from Stanford, and it's a real privilege to honor Dr. Pories. His legacy is vast. I want to point out that the definition of an icon is a painting, and it's usually a painting of an angel. And so it's fitting that Walter, who's an artist, is declared an icon today, and he's been a guardian angel for bariatric surgery for many, many years in two big areas, both safety and effectiveness. You've heard about his work in showing the remission of diabetes, but don't forget his legacy when it came to patient safety. It's because of Walter that we have an MBSA-equipped program now that's 800 hospitals strong and had a 10-fold reduction in mortality over the last decade. I had the pleasure of giving the Walter Pories lecture on patient safety last year at Cleveland Clinic, and it's a real honor, and we're grateful that we had you as a guardian angel looking out for bariatric surgery, Walter. Thank you very much.
Richard Lynn from Palm Beach, Florida. Dr. Pories, you mentioned that you were interviewed by a Nobel Prize winner at Rochester. Well, another Nobel Prize winner who unfortunately has left us a few months ago, Elie Wiesel, especially with your poignant beginnings, and would be very proud, very, very proud for everything he fought for, and which obviously if he could see this video, I'm sure he's watching from above. On a lighter note than that, at the Florida chapter of the American College of Surgeons a year or two ago, Dr. Pories was sent down by the college to do his due diligence as an officer of the college, and he was to be given the hopefully Dr. Hoyt's not here, but the pat presentation of the slides about everything about the college and on this. And as many of you know, in the chapters today, they're changing, and the chapters are predominantly now residents and students and what have you. And there were a bunch of us there, and he decided and said, the hell with the slides, let's just have a panel. And he formed this group of us and sat in front of all the students and the residents and made each of us tell them why it was so great to be a doctor. So they're lucky to have you, Dr. Pories, and it's a privilege to have met you there.
So my name's P.J. Schnartz. I'm currently at the University of Nebraska, but prior to going there, I was at East Carolina University with Dr. Pories. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I actually didn't know very much about Dr. Pories when I arrived. But I had been there about 6 months. I got to interview resident candidates in his office. And in his office, he has this giant thing of books that are about grammar and other fine points that trauma surgeons know very little about. And everybody would come and say, well, Dr. Pories, because they thought I was Dr. Pories, you are so young and you have achieved so much. This doctor here says hello, and this chairman here says hello, and I have 6 months on faculty. So I figured I should get to know Walter Pories. And so I sat next to him at M&M every chance I could get, which turned out to be a grave mistake, because he would draw cartoons, typically of the presenters. And I remember one very, very distinct cartoon, and it was two pigs at a trough. It was a mama pig and a baby pig, and it said, "Mom, if we're vegetarians, how did we get so fat?" And so I got the giggles, and I decided I should no longer sit next to Dr. Pories. But Walter, it's been a true honor to watch you. It's been really inspiring, and sometimes you don't know the influence on the people you have because you may not be directly with them, but I think you inspired a real generation of both young faculty as well as medical students and residents, so thank you.
Richard, would you close? That last picture of the legacy was Richard Ziri as a resident and an accomplished plastic surgeon who stayed in the East and has really made a difference, one of a living example of Walter's legacy.
Great. We're going to take one last comment from the floor, and then I'll make the closing remarks.
Really quick, thank you for the opportunity, Dr. Pories. I could stand here for the next hour and extol your virtues and tell you how you've had an incredible influence on everybody that you've trained. But I'd like to point out one thing that perhaps didn't come through in the video, and that I know everybody that has trained under him knows, but the incredible influence that Dr. Pories had in furthering women in surgery. When I was a young medical student, actually right down the road from here, I got lost on Highway 43 and ended up in Greenville, North Carolina as a fourth-year student doing a one-month rotation there. I fell in love with Greenville, but I also noticed that there were 3 women in the residency program there. And coming from the institution right down the road here, which was a bit more, let's say, traditional at the time, if I may, that was somewhat of a interesting finding for me. So I knew right away that Dr. Pories had a different approach to training, and that his, as was pointed out, his humanism was enormous, but I was impressed also by the fact that he had the courage to introduce a whole new generation of women to surgery, and that he oftentimes perhaps took those that were not traditional trainees or that didn't fit the mold for surgery and made them into outstanding and great surgeons. So thank you, Walter.
We'd like to, on behalf of the Committee on Video-Based Education and Barry's leadership, he just retired from as being chair of the committee. We really worked for years to get the support of the college. David Hoyt has been a great supporter because we have found that these stories are amazing, and we want to preserve these stories for future generations, capture the words of our icons wherever possible. So we'd be grateful if you would fill out the evaluations if you think these sessions are valuable. If you have ideas, because we don't know everybody, please feel free to write Barry or Bill and I. These are labors of love that we do to preserve the art and the craft of surgery. Tomorrow we'll be honoring Hardy Hendren and Catherine Anderson, 2 pediatric surgeons, but 2 very different people. And we hope that you'll pass the word and enjoy learning their stories as well. Thank you so much for coming.